This episode is sponsored by our friends at BVI Yacht Sales in Tortola. With decades of experience, BVI Yacht Sales is dedicated to guiding you through every step of buying or selling your yacht in the Caribbean, ensuring top-notch service. I first met Managing Director Brian Duff way back in the day in Annapolis. Brian is himself an accomplished sailor and actually owned the rig shop where I worked for a time in the mid-2000s. Brian and his team can help list your boat for sale or help you find your dream boat, whether or not they're actually listing it. And don't let the name fool you. They've got an office in Annapolis, too. We joke about broker BS on the podcast, but you can trust our friends at BVI Yacht Sales. Check out their listings and get in touch at bviyachtsales.com, just like it sounds, and tell them 59 North sent you. That's bviyachtsales.com.
Ahoy, shipmates. I'm August, and you are listening to the Quarterdeck Sailing Podcast. As I'm recording this, the Artemis II spacecraft is in the middle of their lunar flyby, and I am following along, and I hope you did too. It is truly amazing stuff. I am a huge space nerd, and this stuff just blows me away. You know, we often compare offshore sailing and spaceflight on this podcast, Andy and myself, a bit tongue-in-cheek, but you know, the first thing that happened to the Artemis II after reaching orbit was that the shitter clogged. So, you know, although we're in different leagues, you know, we are dealing with some of the same challenges. Although, you know, the scope is, of course, vastly different. I think coming down in a few days, they'll be traveling at, like 20,000 knots, I think. So, yeah, no, we're definitely dealing with some different numbers there, but no, truly exciting and inspiring. So I hope you are doing well wherever you are, and I hope you enjoy this episode where Andy and I take a look at an interesting CNC 44. What we're doing here is that we're helping our members at the Quarterdeck with their boat shopping. So if you want to submit your own listing for us to dissect, join the discussion, and see the video from this CNC 44 review, join the Quarterdeck at quarterdeck.59-north.com. Hold fast. I am very ready. Absolutely. This is great fun.
I can't believe that, like, I mean, this is basically what you and I and me and my dad, and I've done this for years, and now that I'm doing it, quote unquote, for my career is quite exciting.
Isn't that nuts? Yeah. Talk about boats at work. It's wonderful. So yeah,
it's the best. It's the best. Okay, so you had actually. So for those of you that are just joining us now, the gist of this is we do a boat shopping thing. People on the Quarterdeck, members on the Quarterdeck, post listings that they're interested either in seriously buying or just want to hear our take on it. And we go through and pick which ones we're most interested in talking about. You picked the episode we just did, the Brewer 35, and I picked this one, although I think this was I think both were mutual choices, but I am choosing a CNC 44 from, let's see, where did I find it here? This is a 1985 CNC 44 that was submitted by Brian on the Quarterdeck, and for context, Brian and I sailed together multiple times with 59 North. Most recently, he came to Sweden to sail on Spica, the old Spica, the Norlene 34, in the Gotland Runt race 2 years ago, the one that we had to crash out of because the boat was filling with water. And Brian, I know, sails in the Midwest, I think on the Great Lakes, I want to say, somewhere out there, and does a lot of club racing and stuff like that. So the CNC 44 is a much more higher performance boat than the Brewer that we just did. So that's the context with this. And I will start by just giving you kind of the gist of the listing here. It says this, and this is actually listed with a broker. This is 1985 CNC 44 listed for $99,000. This is a one-of-a-kind freshwater CNC 44. If you want to race competitively or cruise in comfort, this boat is all caps set up. Now, we have a section that's going to come later in this episode than it did in the first one called Broker BS, where we're going to try to read between the lines of some of the things that they're trying to sell you in the listing. But first, a little bit about the design. As I was researching this, August, I don't know if you've ever noticed this, but you'll often see listings for a Baltic/CNC. Have you ever come across this?
No.
Because I know you had a Baltic 37, right?
I did, yes.
So interestingly, I don't. CNCs are pretty ubiquitous in the U.S. where I'm from, like on the Chesapeake. You see them all the time, but I didn't know that much about them until I did some research for this episode. And I do recall seeing like a listing now and then where it says Baltic/CNC, whatever. And it turns out that basically they had a deal similar to how your Swan 48 sometimes was marketed as a Palmer Johnson 48. They're basically Baltic would buy the designs from CNC and build the same boat, but to a higher fit and finish quality than CNC made them.
Oh, right. Interesting. I always thought they looked very similar. And
they literally look identical in some of the designs because it was the exact same design, just built in Finland versus built in, initially Canada and then Rhode Island. So a little bit of background on the CNC in general. This is one of the ones I mentioned in the Brewer episode that it's cool to have a pedigreed designer and do a search by designer. And it never occurred to me who designs the CNC 44s. Well, it turns out CNC stood for Cuthbertson and Cassian, both with the first name George. So they were these two guys, the two founders of CNC, who had a design office. They were engineers and designers, and basically they are also the designers. So the CNC had an in-house design team of George and George. Now, this is a little bit half-assed internet research, so I didn't fact-check that, but sounds good. And I noticed, you talk about like Swan as another example. Swans have been designed by S&S, by German Freers most recently. Same Hallberg Rassies have different designers, but CNC are CNC design, which I found interesting. But again, there's not much like, the CNC is a well-known name, but like that's kind of like meh for me. I like having a name behind stuff, so that's maybe not I don't know if it's a negative. It's just I think it's cool to have a known designer attached to the name, but I guess CNC itself is the known designer.
They must have had, there's probably several designers then, right? And it's kind of in-house. They probably have like a team.
I guess so. Yeah, I'm sure. All design offices are like that. It's not, you see a Bruce Farr design, like Falcon's a Farr 65. Well, it wasn't necessarily Bruce that designed the entire boat. It was his team at the Farr design office.
Yeah.
So that's fair. So CNCs were basically sort of your classic performance cruiser. And this one is from the mid 80s, which was like smack in the height of the IOR era. And like the IOR era was known for producing very beamy boats that were somewhat unwieldy to sail hard downwind. Right here in the opening picture, if you're watching this video, you can just see the extreme beam at the waterline of this boat. The boat is heeled over hard, and there's guys hiked out on the rail, but you can just see it's like a very bulbous boat with pinched bow and a pinched stern, and that was kind of the classic IOR shape of that era. And I got to say, on a boat that's this big, it's 44 feet, it's longer. It looks better when it's longer. When you see this same sort of design philosophy applied to like a 30 or 35 footer, they really look like a watermelon seed.
Yeah, that's true. Very droplet shaped.
And you said, August, this was the reddest boat you've ever seen. So for those listening to the podcast, please describe what you mean by that.
It is, everything is red. The hull is red, the mast is red, they've painted the spreaders red, the boom is red, and there are several photos here that I think span quite a long time because they're altered. The boat is changing throughout, and there's a spinnaker pole which is red. And then we have there's a radar mast that has been added, which is also red. And then there is a bowsprit that's been added too that pops up along the lines here, which is also painted red.
Retractable bowsprit, like you'd see on a J80.
That's right. So they're very, very, very committed to the color scheme here, and I guess red probably makes it go faster. Is that right?
It looks like it's going faster. I can tell you that much. You can't beat a red boat. Motessier had it right back in the day. His famous Ketch Joshua was bright red. I don't think the masts were red, but man, it is hard to beat a bright red boat is hard to beat. They just stand out, and man, they make even uncool boats look cool, and they make cool boats look really cool.
Yeah, that is very. I mean, especially on like what is now a pretty like retro design. I think it looks fantastic. So
it looks awesome.
Yeah.
So it's a little more on CNC. Some background of CNC. They're, like I said, pretty ubiquitous. They were a big time production boat back in the day. Built in Rhode Island. You don't see a lot of boats built in the U.S. anymore. Now this is going to come up as one of my red flags later in the categories, but they were built to be performance racer cruisers, which means they were kind of optimized for lighter weight, which means they have a ton of balsa in them. And after my experience with the Norleen 34, I swore I'd never buy another boat that had any balsa anywhere in it, because especially on older boats, if you introduce water into balsa core of hull or deck, and it's just a nightmare. So these boats, when they were new, that balsa created a very stiff structure. So that the hulls, most of the CNC hulls were balsa cored hull down to the waterline, then solid fiberglass under the waterline, and a balsa cored deck. And our Norleen 34 was exactly like that. And it creates a very stiff structure for the deck and the hull, which is, again, a little more performance-oriented, and a lighter structure. But God forbid you break that fiberglass seal and put water in there. Balsa is very good at migrating the water to the rest of the entire structure, and you just end up with basically mushy mush when you get water in there. Ask our friend Lee, who used to produce the podcast. He had a Tiana 37 with balsa cord decks, and he replaced all that himself. And we're going to get to the episode we're going to get to the category called Project Creep, and that's going to come back around. So, but that was a sort of one of the characteristics of CNC boats, how they were built. So fiberglass, most of them were balsa cord. This one the CNC 44 had a bolted on lead keel, and that lead keel was bolted into a fiberglass grid construction in the bottom of the boat. So that's a good thing. Just like Falcon was built, solid fiberglass grid structure that took the keel loads, as opposed to sort of your modern production boats that have a glued in grid structure, which is not nearly as structurally strong. So all things being equal, if the boat's in good structural condition, it was they built good quality boats, I would say. CNCs have a pretty good reputation, but that balsa thing is a big red flag, which we'll come back to. I mean, on that note, August, what do you notice? I mean, are you familiar with CNCs? Do you have any opinion on them? I mean, I think they're more common where I'm from than where you're from.
Yeah, you don't see a lot of them here, but I mean, there's a lot of them around, right? I don't think I've ever sailed on one myself, but they do look very similar to my old Baltic, which I love dearly. And for the most part, I like those old IOR designs. I think they're quite neat. So I like what I'm seeing.
I also think that saying a boat was from the IOR era is kind of like a bad word nowadays, because like the Fastnet disaster in '79 blamed a lot of that on the instability of the boat. I actually think that's kind of crap, because especially in the context that we're talking about this here, where we're talking about boats primarily used for cruising. That's kind of our wheelhouse. And the IOR boats were notoriously difficult to handle downwind, but only if you're flying a kite in heavy weather. And like, we're not going to be doing that. Even Eastbjorn is an early era IOR. When we talk about that, actually, we should kind of provide some context here. IOR was a racing rule that a lot of designers built or designed boats, not necessarily trying to optimize the boat to go fast, but to actually try to make the boat slow under the rule, so it got a better handicap, so that it would perform better against a racing fleet. So it's a very... The incentives of designing boats around racing rules are completely backwards. And as an interesting little aside in history, the Cal 40 became an all-time famous racing boat back in the 60s, because they basically, the guy that designed the Cal 40, oh man, this name is escaping me now. Oh, come on. This is terrible of me. This is blasphemous. Please help me out here. Look this up while I'm telling this story.
Will do.
But basically, he said, and And this was back in the there was a different racing rule, the pre-IOR rule. I also forget what that was called. But basically, he said, forget the rule. I'm just going to design the fastest boat. And it's going to be so fast that it's still going to win on handicap. And it did. And it was famous. And it was a very, very good, balanced, good performing sailing boat. So you get these IOR boats. They have a reputation for designing around the rule, not designing a good boat. And sometimes that goes wrong. But really, that only goes wrong if you're pushing it hard in a racing context. Now, knowing Brian and knowing
Lapworth,
that... Thank you, Bill Lapworth. Thank you, August. So anyway, in the context of what Brian might be looking for this boat at, if he's looking to race it, then that might be a consideration that these IOR boats are notoriously hard to handle in heavy weather downwind. Partly also because they fly a symmetric kite, so they get that kind of death roll thing going on. This boat's been modified with the bowsprit. We'll come back to all that. But that's what we're talking about when we talk about these racing rule situations. Okay, August, any more background on the CNC in general before we get into the categories?
Not for me. No, I think that's great.
All right, we're going to flip the order around a little bit, and I think we'll start with the first category. We're going to call this the design DNA. So this is where I want to look at some of the numbers of the boat and talk about how those numbers translate into actual performance. So August, if you want to do us a favor here, and for the audio listeners, read some of the numbers off the listing. And then I've got some more numbers for us from Sailboat Data.
Very nice. Sure. Yes. So we got 44-foot length, as mentioned, waterline length of 35 feet 4 inches. Max draft is 8 feet 4 inches. Beam is 13 feet 3 inches. Bridge clearance, this is a good one, 63 feet 3 inches.
I'm delighted to see that. Most listings don't include, that's otherwise known as air draft. So how high is the mast off the water?
Yeah, that is nice. It's because sometimes you get the length of the actual mast, but that doesn't tell you the whole picture.
Yep.
So we got a displacement of 20,906 pounds. And a max speed that's listed here of 7.96. Very specific numbers here.
That's, of course, the formula that takes the waterline length, and being that it's a displacement hull, gives you what you should actually expect to be the theoretical max.
The hull speed, yeah. And yeah, that's probably it from the listing here, I would think.
So a couple comments on that. This is clearly a high-performance boat, a draft of 8 feet 4 inches on a 44-foot boat. Proportionally, that's deeper than Eastbjorn, and probably deeper than, much deeper proportionally than Falcon. I mean, Falcon's 65 feet overall and only has a draft of 10 feet. So this is optimized for performance. Also, that air draft, 63-foot mast on a 44-foot boat. That is towering.
That is really cool. That's a kind of good, if you're wondering how performance-based a boat is, if you just take the length of the boat, kind of divided by the height of the mast, that's a pretty good indication of how fast this thing's going to go.
Well, that's at least what the designer had in mind. Okay, I'm going to put a giant mast on this and make it go fast. So if we go to Sailboat Data, which is one of my all-time favorite websites, we're going to take those numbers and put them in a little bit more context. So when you take a displacement of 20,000 pounds, for example, and you take the sail area of 924 square feet, that is usually referring to the sail area of the white sails, so not including any spinnakers. And typically, again, some designers and some brochures will give you the maximum sail area with the largest Genoa. Sometimes that's overlapping, but to compare apples to apples, you should try to find sail area that is using the 4 triangle area, not the area of the largest jib. That gives you more realistic numbers here. So anyway, sail area of 924 feet. We don't know what that's referring to, but I think Sailboat Data usually uses the baseline of the 4 triangle area. So if we do some calculations down here, the sail area to displacement, this is a ratio of how much sail versus how much the boat weighs. This is 19.5. So for a boat from the 80s, that is quite high. For comparison's sake, I think Eastbjorn is around 15 and a half or 16.
I think she's just 16, yeah.
16. Falcon, I think, is 20 or 21. So that is up there. That is up there. Ballast to displacement. This is the ratio of how much weight is in the keel versus the weight overall of the boat. So 47%, that means 47% of the displacement is all in the keel. So that's going to make for a quite stiff boat, as well as the fact that it's quite beamy. Displacement to length, so this is the weight versus the waterline length. That's 213. If you recall from the Brewer episode, that was over 300 something. So this is much, much lighter, but still not what they call the ultra light displacement boats. The sleds from California, they were like under 100 on that number. So it's still a moderate boat in terms of what that number means in context. There's your Brewer comfort ratio of 27. So my guess is that the lower the number, the less comfortable, given that Brewer 35 had a number of 35, I believe.
That is true. The lower the less comfort. That's right. And
you don't always see this, but the next number down here is the S number, and that was basically a measure of excitement. That was like the excitement factor. So like the higher the number, the more exciting the boat is to sail. And this is getting up there close to 3, which is in most of the boats that we sail on, I think, are down in the 1s. This is 2.8. So that tells you that this is going to be a lively boat to sail.
How is that? Do you know how that's calculated? That's interesting. I never heard about that before.
You could look it up while I talk.
Yeah, we'll do.
Yeah, I had never heard of that before either until I was doing some research on our Norline 34 and came across that. I thought that was quite cool. And then you've got the sort of rig and sail particulars at the bottom here. The I, J, P, and E, these are measures of the rig dimensions. Gives you the foresail area, the mainsail area, sail area total. And this is here, it says the 100% fore triangle and main triangles. That's the 923 feet. So I really like looking at this sailboat data to get an idea of what the boat is going to perform like. And I think of all these numbers we talked about, the most important number of all is the sail area to displacement. That's the best way to compare the performance from one boat to another. So this tells me right off the bat that this is going to be a pretty fast, good boat in light air, but also one that you might need to reef early in a cruising context. And I can tell you from experience, Falcon being at 21, we're almost always sailing with 1 or 2 reefs in the main if the wind's over 12 or 15 knots. Did you find a definition for the S number, August?
I did. So it is a number projecting a boat's speed potential based on a 1 to 10 scale, combines displacement to length ratio and sail area to displacement to classify boats ranging from lead sled cruisers probably, to
lead
racing
sled
machines. Right. So, I mean, yeah. It's and the formula is it's a very long weird formula, but yeah.
But it's basically combining that. What did you say? The displacement to length and sail area to displacement.
That's right.
That's good because I think the displacement to length ratio can be misleading sometimes because some boats that were, these old boats that had long overhangs, they have a very high displacement to length ratio because the length they're taking is the waterline length. But when the boat is actually sailing, it's extending its waterline. So you see this huge number, like Arcturus, our first boat, had displacement to length of like 350 or something. But it was a good sailing boat because it was always sailed heeled over, and now you're immersing more of the waterline, and you're actually dynamically changing those numbers. These numbers are all static numbers. So you got to kind of... There is a trick to reading between the lines here, which is kind of the whole point of doing these episodes. So, but I would say that and here's a fact check right off the bat. The Sailboat Data says the designer of this boat was Rob Ball. So that might have been the internet lying to me earlier. Now I also don't know who Rob Ball is. Maybe he worked for CNC, but there you go.
There we go. There is a that rings a bell actually. But yeah, cool. So
we're gonna have to fact check that. But anyway, so I would say if we bring this full circle back to this category, the design DNA, I think it's quite clear that this boat was built to do both racing and cruising, and I think the numbers back that up. And I would say that the numbers actually put this on the scale of it's probably going to be a very fun, fast boat to sail.
Yes, I would agree. This looks like a great sailing boat.
Okay, let's see. Where was my next category here? I rearranged this on my sheet. Now I'm scrolling all around my page here. Okay, dock walk. This is the fun part here. Let's get into our first impressions here, just looking at the pictures, August. So when you scroll through the photos of this listing, what are the first things that stand out to you besides the color red as you browse the boat here?
Well, it's of course you're not going to miss this at the dock. It's got this kind of intense like burgundy red, just like screaming at you. It's like so saturated. It's wonderful. But yeah, no, very, very red. I think also just the height of the mast is going to be one of the first things that you'll notice here. And then it's just a classic IOR boat. And it reminds me very much of my old Baltic 37. I think that would be kind of my first thoughts that would enter my head as I gazed upon this.
Yeah, a couple small details that you might not notice at first glance. If you look at the picture you're showing there now, you can see there's like a hole in the starboard side of the transom. That hole, and this is again back to what was the purpose of the boat. The boat was designed as a racing boat that could also cruise. That hole was to stow the man overboard pole. You'd slide it in that hole, and then you'd yank it out if somebody went overboard. And you can actually see the pole sticking out in one of the other photos. The photo you had up before with the guys on the foredeck with the kite, you can see that pole sticking out of that hole just underneath the horseshoe buoy there. If you go to, it's like the second picture.
Interesting. There we go. Huh.
So that, if you see boats with a hole in the transom, that's what that hole is for. It's designed to stow the man overboard pole.
Oh, and it's connected to the horseshoe buoy. You throw the horseshoe buoy overboard, and then the drag pulls the pole out. Oh, that is neat. I like that. Cool.
Another thing, like you said, the classic IOR, it's basically got that very wide transom that really slopes, kind of matches the angle of the bow. That Ice Bear had that same sort of look, that big transom on the back.
Yeah.
I'm noticing, let's see here. I'm noticing in some of the pictures here on deck, all the lines lead back to the cockpit. We have no teak on deck, which I'm always noticing that as a good sign. I noticed the tow rail. It has an aluminum tow rail, which I very much appreciate. I love a boat with an aluminum tow rail, just like Eastbjorn. You can attach stuff to it. It's got, this is interesting, actually. It has very inboard shrouds and even further inboard Genoa tracks that go way back to the cockpit. Normally when you see shrouds, chain plates set so far inboard, almost always the track is outboard of those shrouds. In this case, it's inboard. So they're both going to be flying kind of small, like a staysail or a small jib that goes to the forward part of that track inside the shrouds, but also it's going to allow you to get really tight sheeting angles on your Genoa that overlaps the shrouds because of how far aft that track goes and how far inboard it is. It's butted up against the cabin sides.
Yeah, that's true. That's a good, like, if you're just kind of trying to judge boat sailing characteristics just by looking at it like this, having the tracks that far inboard is telling you that this is a very weatherly boat. It's going to be, because like the fact that the boat, that there is even a point to putting the tracks that far inward means that the boat can actually sail with the sheeting point that far inboard, which is very, very impressive.
Well, that calls back to the design, like the keel and the rudder. You can't, if you put these tracks and this chain plate arrangement on that Brewer we talked about last episode, you ain't going to sail upwind at those angles because the hull shape just won't do it. Whereas this boat with that 8.5 foot draft, deep draft, tall rig, it's skinny hull shape, lighter weight. It's going to be able to sail tighter angles, and that's a good point. Yeah. I also note on this same picture. Sorry, go ahead. What were you going to say?
Yeah, there's just if you have like full keel double ender classic boats, will have like the Genoa track like all the way out in line with the tow rail
on the rail. Yeah,
because it's like with the full keel, there's no point. It's like moving the sheeting point further inboard. There's no point because the boat won't be able to point high enough to make that effective anyway.
Couple other things I noticed in this picture. They even have red tape on the turnbuckles.
Oh, yeah, look at that.
But on those turnbuckles, the reason I bring those up is that this mast is the classic 80s tall, skinny, bendy rig, and all three shrouds attach at the same point. And you'll also notice in that first photo of the boat heeled over sailing, it's hard to see, but once you see it, you can't unsee it. You've got the backstay on the back, and you've got runners that split into a check stay and a runner on the mast to stabilize that bendy mast fore and aft, because all of the shrouds are in line with the mast. You have inline spreaders, inline shrouds, and then you've got runners and check stays leading to one point there on the windward rail. And that is the same way Ice Bear was set up. All boats from this era were set up that way. There's a great book called Blue Water Racing that talks all about different rig types and how to tune them for sailing. The point of this was this mast was very shapeable. You could bend it to make it whatever shape you wanted to affect the mainsail shape, but it requires a lot of lines on it. So you have not just runners, but check stays. And they always have to be on because that mast is going to be a noodle without them. And it makes the boat more complicated to sail. Anybody that's sailed on Ice Bear with us will know that we're always messing around with the runners. I believe, August, you were on board with me on Ice Bear when the deck fitting failed on that runner on the windward side that one time and it pinged off.
That's right. That's right. Pull the fitting right out of the deck. That's
so
the stainless fitting broke off, I guess is the more...
These inline spreader rigs are more difficult to sail than the modern swept-back spreaders, or even a rig like Eastbjorn's that has split lower shrouds, where at least you have a chain plate fore and aft to take some of that load. And also, right off the bat, I know that even though this is a 44-foot boat, it's got 3 spreaders on the rig, and 3 spreaders. What all that spreaders do is stabilize the center, basically stabilize the tube of the mast in between unsupported sections. So oftentimes you'll see on heavy cruising boats, even if it's a tall mast, maybe it only has 1 spreader because the section of that mast, the diameter of the tube, is fat enough that it doesn't need support. So the more spreaders, the skinnier the tube, the more support it needs. And therefore there's more complication, more complexity in the rig, more things to go wrong, more shrouds, more pieces of rigging, more fittings. So that's not bad. It's just explaining what that means. I said at the break we were going to go faster through these dock walk sections. There's so much to talk about here, though. It's hard to do that.
That's true. I got to mention just quickly before we move on, this Dodger, which is very interesting. It's a tiny, tiny, completely zipped up Dodger. It's almost like a dome. You can sit here and just like look out, and doesn't offer any protection at all for the crew in the cockpit. It's just there's a very high bridge deck, and you just kind of look into this tiny, tiny kids play tent thing, which is of course bright red as well. Before you go down below, it's a very distinctive look, I would say.
So this is a great angle to emphasize that this boat was clearly designed for sailing first, living aboard second. I mean, it's going to be a pain in the ass to climb over that bridge deck to go up and down below. Like you say, you have no protection behind the Dodger. You have a lot of winches. I can see 8 winches in this one photo alone, which means you've got great controls for everything where you need them, but it's stuff in the way when you're trying to sit and have your cocktails and crudités at the end of the day. You've got a traveler in the cockpit. Now, frankly, this is like up my alley. I like this. I like having a boat that's designed to sail first, and I'd rather compromise on the live aboard ergonomics before compromising on the sailing system. So this is speaking my language, but it is very obvious what this boat was designed for when you see this cockpit layout.
Totally.
Okay, let's see what else stands out. That's basically the on deck stuff. I see a teak handrail. I don't love that, and also the varnish is peeling off of it, but other than that, there's not really any wood on deck. There's a little bit of teak in the cockpit.
There's a CQR anchor. I don't love that.
Yeah, so he's got an old school. Like you can tell though, this boat probably doesn't spend a ton of time at anchor. I do like though the recessed windlass under the deck fitting there. I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's nice. That is nice.
It does. The fact that it has a windlass tells you at least it is a cruising boat. It's not just a racing boat.
Although in a lot of the older pictures, I guess there's probably used to be more racing, and then it's added these kind of creature comfort cruising things after a while.
Go back to that last picture of the foredeck with the windlass thing. This is an interesting thing that you might not notice at first glance. Look at the fitting on deck just aft of the windlass, there is a double folding pad eye fitting there with what appears to be a 2-to-1 halyard kind of snapped down to it. My guess is that is a deck fitting for a staysail, an inner forestaysail. And what that 2-to-1 halyard is, it could be one of two things. It's either to fly like a Code Zero or something on the bowsprit, and that's just where they have it stowed, or it could be a staysail that is on a luff line roller furler, and you use the 2-to-1 halyard to get tension in the stay. So basically, there would be no structural stay. The stay itself is in the luff of the sail, and you use a 2-to-1 halyard to get. And that's also got a swivel on it to get the tension you need in the luff of that sail. A lot of the it's basically similar to how the Vendée Globe boats do their sort of inner stays. So you can have a furler on there, but you can also take it away. If that's what it is, that's pretty neat. That's pretty high tech. I like that.
Yeah,
that's pretty cool. If indeed that's what it is, but I'm sure that fitting is a tack fitting for a inner forestay fitting. That's the same fitting we used on my dad's boat.
Espion has the same one too, actually.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Okay. I was gonna say something else here. I guess what I should say here is we haven't really looked at the listing yet, and I ordered these categories like this on purpose because I believe that it's kind of like the way I look at a weather forecast before I read WRI's forecast. I like to create my own first impressions before I read the listing, and that gives me a better sense of what is bullshit in the listing or not. If I already have some kind of preconceived ideas from just looking at the photos, it might help me read between the lines a little bit when I actually go back and compare it to the listing. So this is on purpose that we haven't looked at the listing yet.
Very cool. Yeah. Although it's important to also remember that the pictures are not objective. The owner chose what to take pictures of, what to exclude, and how to frame everything. But yes, no, you're absolutely right. That's a good way of doing it.
Let's move along to the next category. This is along the same lines. Let's move to the inside of the boat and make some impressions on what would it be like to live aboard this boat as opposed to sail this boat. So let's move inside, August. What do you think about the interior arrangement of this boat? What do we see in this picture?
Well, we're kind of looking at a picture here from the companionway. So we're coming down and we see the nav station right straight to port as you come down. And it's a great little nav station with a seat, tons of instruments all over the bulkhead there, and a big, nice chart table. And then it's quite open. There's not like a semi-bulkhead kind of separating the salon from the galley in the nav station. It's a quite open, nice salon without a table, mind you. So there's no table there. You just have the mast coming through the salon there. The galley is on the starboard side. You got the kind of sink in the middle, and then the rest of the galley on the starboard side. And then you have the heads, I believe, is just directly behind the nav station. And then there's a little hallway back on the starboard side where you enter the aft cabin. I think this is a great layout, and again, identical to the Baltic 37 that I had.
Interesting. Go back to that main. There you go. The main cabin layout. This is interesting because I agree with you on the layout. First of all. But again, there's some signs here that this boat was built for sailing first, living on second. I wonder if it had a table that they just removed for racing, because that's a big thing that's missing for cruising. But notice that it looks like the mast is like right in the center of the salon, and it's kind of an optical illusion because typically you see a keel step mast is right up against a bulkhead, dividing the sort of the salon from the forward part of the boat. But that bulkhead is a good 4 feet forward of that mast, and the whole interior the mast is not actually in the middle of the boat. The mast would be still in that sort of mid forward position like you'd normally see it. It's just that main bulkhead is pushed way forward to give a bigger salon and more area in the back of the boat. Basically, the galley and the nav station here appears to be at the widest part of the boat, which is typically reserved for the salon, and you've got pilot bunks on either side outboard, and you can see those vertical blue columns are actually the chain plates padded because you're sleeping right next to them that are transferring the load from the rig down into the stringers inside the hull. And again, you've got 4 quite good sea bunks in this main salon area if you had lee boards or lee cloths attached to them. Although on the pilot bunks, you might the chain plates themselves might act as a pretty good lee board. But I just wanted to call that out, that bulkhead, it looks like the boat's bigger than it is, because my guess is that forward cabin is much, much smaller, and there's probably not a head there, which is good. You don't want the head in the forward part of the boat. You want the head aft. So I agree. I think this is a unique layout, but I also quite like it.
But yeah, that's a good point about you can see the chain plates here. That's another consequence of making a boat this weatherly, is that, and then having to move the chain plates further inboard, is that they start to mess up with the interior of the boat as well. So,
there's not a lot of storage in here, though. A lot of sleeping places for people, but like what you gain when those 2 pilot bunks, normally on a cruising boat, those would be cabinets or bookshelves or something, and that's a ton of volume that you're losing in storage because of having those bunks there. So that's, again, clearly on this boat was meant for racing, not cruising, is the priority.
Absolutely. Let's see. So we got a nice. I mean, this is a big, nice galley. Tons of storage there. That's really neat.
Huge galley, yeah. For a 44-footer, that's a huge galley. I do like you're looking aft now. You do have a little bit of space to kind of lean on either tack, where you're leaning against the companionway steps, and then you've got counter space opposite of that. But as you can be, as you know on Eastbjorn, when you're at that stove, if that stove in this picture is on the high side of the boat, if you're on starboard tack, it's a long way down to the nav station. And if you're not strapped in or holding on, I mean, August, you can probably tell some war stories about that. And I think that's kind of a negative in that sense.
Yeah, no, true. It's there's a lot of space here to fall around. That is true. See if we get here. We can see those pilot birds. They look really small. The pilot birds here. You got to put the smallest crew into those for sure.
Well, they're because they're angled towards the front of the boat. They bend in quite a lot, so you're not going to have a lot of room for your feet. They're wider at your shoulders if your head is aft. So they're probably pretty cozy sea bunks. And there you go. This is a much tinier V berth than you'd normally see on a 44-foot cruising boat.
Yeah, they have. There's not a big kind of chain locker here. We can kind of just see where the that compartment where the windlass is sitting, right at the bow here. And then we have
in that photo you can see the back. So this is the chain plate for that deck fitting that I was talking about for the staysail. You can see there's a little bulkhead there with a huge plate mounted to it. So that's a nice big backing plate for that inner forestay fitting.
There we go. And the bright red retractable bowsprit comes into this space as well. There we go. Look at that.
That must have been a hell of a project to retrofit that.
Hell of a project. We discussed doing that on Eastbjorn. And a good friend of mine actually just did on his Swan 52. And it's huge, massive project. There's just so much load on those things. And you got to make sure you do that properly. But yeah, I mean, it's clearly, it's been made to race. Here we can see the aft cabin, which actually has one big bunk in the center, kind of an owner's cabin type, which doesn't look to be a great sea bunk. It's in the middle, and there's a lot of space to bounce around.
I've never quite seen a layout like this. I like the concept, but they kind of ruined it. Like, you could easily put a lee board in the center of that. There's 2 different cushions making up this double, but there's nothing on the sides. Like, the whole point of having a nice sea bunk aft is to be able to lean on the sides, but you're going to literally, like, they tried to do like a modern island queen style bunk, but it's not big enough cabin for that. And they lost the beauty of the sea bunks. Although if you put a lee board in the middle, you could always sleep on the high side, but then you're only getting one bunk back there. So I like the concept of the under cockpit cabin, but I don't love the execution.
This was I thought I'm checking sailboat data now to see the original drawings. So this is actually how it was meant to be. Yeah. I thought maybe this has been retrofitted, but no, that's how it is.
I mean, generally speaking, this is a kind of a pretty basic interior. It's kind of got a lot of white plastic. and a little bit of teak, varnished teak on some of the wood. It's probably nicer fit. It looks like your standard Beneteau or Bavaria, but maybe a little bit nicer from the 80s. Maybe it was a little warmer and nicer, but it basically has a lot of that plasticky production boat feel to it, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. It's just to try to describe this visually. That's what you're looking at. You got a lot of white plastic in places, but it looks reasonably classy.
Yeah, I like it. I think it looks good. Got a foot pump there in the galley, and that's the last picture.
So, what do you think in general? What do you think this boat would be like if you're gonna sort of live aboard cruise on this boat? What's the vibe?
I think this would be great. I think this would be wonderful. It's I kind of tried this out on the Baltic 37, which is quite a bit smaller, but otherwise very similar layout, and I think it's great. I think for a kind of cruising lifestyle with longer passages where you want to spend a lot of time actually being out in the ocean, and this is going to be great. This is going to be very nice to sail on, very fun, and I think the interior works really well.
Yeah, I think I agree. I mean, this is right up my alley. I always prefer performance first, comfort second, and I think this does a lot on the comfort side. I think I'd probably, we had basically a smaller version of this layout on the old Spica, under cockpit double pilot bunks, and yet you end up using those pilot bunks for just storage, and it's not the tidiest storage because you can see everything, but if you really wanted to, you could retrofit some cabinets in there and build some really nice storage in there if you wanted to. But you can also use duffel bags and shove them up on the pilot bunks there. So I agree. I think this would be I think you would have a lot of fun sailing this boat, and I think you might find some things annoying living aboard. But I will always take that trade off.
100%. Yes.
Okay. We made our first impressions just looking at the photos. Now, this is the section I moved from the top of last episode. Now, let's go to the category that I like to call broker BS. What is the broker trying to sell us, and how much truth is there in that sales pitch? So we'll go back to the listing, and we've already said at the top, it's a one-of-a-kind freshwater CNC 44. If you want to race competitively or cruise in comfort, this boat is set up. So let's go down through the bullet point things, August, and just pick out some sort of features or things that they talk about, and let's sort of read between the lines on some of that stuff.
Yeah, we should mention, I'm not sure if we already did, but the price is $99,000 US. And let's see here. We got a Yanmar 1985. It doesn't say which Yanmar it is.
It does say 44 horsepower.
44 horsepower. There we go. Which is not a lot. They repeat. The boat is set up, and here we go. Recent maintenance, replacements, and upgrades are as follows: dual autopilot systems, Yanmar engine panel, keel rebedded. Chain plates rebedded. That's nice. Deck painted. Cabin interior painted. Force 10 propane stove. Got a refrigeration system, sound system, bilge, pump blower, head, and fuel hoses replaced. Although it doesn't say when it was replaced, which
I was going to get to that.
Interesting.
So keep reading down this, then we'll read the list, then we'll read between the lines.
Right. Water heater and water system components replaced. Some tankage upgraded. Red lights installed throughout cabin for night operations. Oh, they like red lights. That's a shocker. Lifelines, fans installed, cutlass bearing, R&R, mast wiring, R&R, LED.
What does R&R mean,
lights.
you think? Repaired and replaced?
I thought it was it like a brand or something, but I don't know.
No, definitely not.
Yeah, it's never heard about it, but
I don't know what that
probably
means.
Could be, yeah. LED running lights, radar dome on gimbaled tower, radar twin network displays, VHF, I-70 instrument upgrades, NG NEMA 2K backbone, cell booster. What is a cell booster?
I think that's probably like a cell phone network extender.
Oh, right. Inner forestay with furling staysail.
Yeah, I think I was right about that picture then. for the furling
oh,
staysail.
yeah.
On that deck fitting. Yeah, there
Right,
you go.
right. Storm, trysail, sail track, battery monitor, how output Balmar alternator. Almost got one of those for Eastbeyond. Increased house battery bank. What does that mean? Dedicated engine battery inverter.
I can't wait to pick this apart.
Yeah, retractable bowsprit for asymmetrical, which is in bold. Running rigging R&R, so yeah, replaced in.
No, I wonder too. I wonder if R&R is like a refit yard, like a place that did all that work.
Maybe, yeah. Teak modern glue down style on cockpit seats and sole, replaced fixed ports, larger opening ports added in cockpit, galley countertops with deeper sink and upgraded faucet, S-bar heater, windlass, and custom anchor roller, plus many other items.
So if we go to the heading of that was things that were recently, what was it?
Repairs, replacements,
and upgrades. So let's just pause here for a second before we go further through the listing. I mean, this is like classic broker speak. It's like, how many items can I put on this list that may or may not have happened, quote unquote, recently? And let's be as vague as possible about them. So like, all this stuff sounds cool, but all this does for me is opens up a bunch of other questions. So if you stop scrolling around like a maniac, so I can see this.
Looking at
If you go like scroll up to the top of that list, you've got like, okay, keel rebedded, chain plates rebedded. Okay, well, there's like a good way to do that and the right way to do that. Like, does that mean that they actually took the keel off of the boat, reattached it, inspected everything, and rebedded it? Or does it mean they just like dug out the caulk and the seam and put more caulk in? Same thing with the chain plates. Did they remove the chain plates entirely, clean them all up, and reinstall them with new sealant? Or were they just like dug out with everything in place? Because that's a major difference. Because if they weren't removed and replaced, then I would argue they didn't actually properly rebed them. They just kind of put a Band-Aid on it. Also, keel rebedded. Well, why?
Yeah.
Was there a problem? That's,
Grounding, perhaps.
bolt-on keel. That makes me a little bit nervous. Deck painted, cabin interior painted. Okay, recent repairs. Like when recent? This listing's from 2026. Was it done like our last listing? New sales 2017. Well, does recent mean 10 years ago or does it mean last year? So each one of these items, we don't have to go through every single one of them, but basically every single item on here creates more questions than answers for me.
For sure. I think it'd be interesting to see, okay, so the Yanmar engine panel and the windlass is on the list of like new, recently fixed, right? If we have a look at that windlass.
It does look pretty nice.
Yeah, it's not bad actually. That is not bad.
Engine panel
Panel.
Looks...
It's not.
Those buttons look pretty worn out. That doesn't look new to me.
That does not look new. And it's even in this nice little recessed kind of nook here. And it's got a lot of condensation and foggy and moldy. Yeah, no, so this is almost not worth anything, right? Because we have no idea how old this stuff is.
Well, I mean, it's good information, but it's not complete information. It's just not. I mean, you just don't know. I mean, one thing that tells me a little bit, like the N2K backbone, like that's a relatively modern thing. That's good to see. A boat like this would have not. It's too old to have been built with that. So they've done upgrades at some point, but I'd want to know a lot more than what that is telling me.
Yeah, and the N2K can't be 20 years old because that didn't exist.
No, exactly. So let's keep going down the listing here and get so this is just now the standard stuff, not stuff that was replaced. So I'll let you take it back here.
All right, so we're under sail and rigging now. So it says Dacron main, full battened, which is 4 battens with 2 reef points, hardly used. UK tape drive main, full battened, 5 battens with 3 reef points from 2010. So 2 mainsails on there.
So hang on, do you know what a tape drive mainsail is?
No.
This is a very racing specific thing. So you basically have this mast will have a luff groove in it, similar to what a roller furler will have, where you can either have sliders go in that luff groove for a traditional slab reefing main, which is what their Dacron main is, I assume. Again, hardly used. Well, what does that mean? And then tape drive, I think, is basically you have the luff is a continuous bolt rope luff, just like on a jib, that slides
like
up that track and creates a much better interface between mast and sail. However, it means that when you refit and when you lower it, it comes out of that track. And now you have to deal with it. So that is a specific racing sail that requires crew just to, at the end of the day, to drop the sail. You can't just drop the sail because it's just going to come off the mast. And Mia and I delivered a FAR 39 that was a racing boat up the Chesapeake once that had that, and it was a freaking gigantic pain in the ass with just the two of us. So that is definitely not a cruising sail, but the fact that they have the other main tells you can go back and forth.
Yeah. And oh man, also like 5 battens as well. That's going to be unhandy. You cannot take that down. Interesting. Right. Okay. So moving on, we have on head sails, we have a number 1 light, again with UK tape drive, which is slightly used. And we have a similar one, only a heavy cloth version. We have a number 2, again with the tape drive roller from 2013, which is used for 3 seasons. We have another number 2 from 2008, which is usable but tired. And then we have another number 2, so it's 3 number 2 sails, which is which goes on the roller, which is Dacron, which is an older delivery sail. That's a nice cruising sail there. 1 number 3 tape drive with batten, slightly used. A number 4, which is UK Dacron inner forestay furler in bold. That was the one that you talked about with the fitting on that we saw on the fitting on the deck there. Like new, slightly used. And then there's a staysail / drifter in it's a lighter material Dacron, which is older but usable.
I'm going to slow you down because if you read all of these other sails, it's going to take us the rest of the day.
A lot of sails.
And I got to go to the dentist. But basically, I'm counting. Let's just count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 8. There's 19 sails that come with this boat.
Yeah.
4 symmetrical spinnakers and 4 asymmetrical spinnakers. 3 storm sails, a storm trysail, 2 storm jibs. Everything looks to be sort of 20 years old or so. So tons of sails. Clearly the boat was used for racing. And I would say reading between the lines on this, like right off the bat, the headline of this is it was a freshwater boat. So it's a Great Lakes boat, I assume, which is like, that's really, really good. That's a huge benefit. And that basically freshwater boats that are used in northern environments means they're basically probably only used for like a few months out of the year, and they're not getting the heat and saltwater corrosion that you get of boats that go to the Caribbean. So it really, really, really reduces the aging on all these components that you always hear us talking about. So like, I don't know, but a boat from 1985 that's been used exclusively in fresh water is going to look and be way nicer than a much newer boat that's been used in the Caribbean, for example. So that's a huge benefit of this. And man, there's so many freaking sails here that like you'll get by. You use it for a couple seasons before you decide what you need to do. And it depends on how much racing you're actually going to do. Because the cool thing is, for a boat like this to race with, it's a relatively inexpensive purchase price, which means you could, if you really were into racing, you could spend some money on new racing sails and still have a nice little package for not a ton of money.
Yeah, totally. I think the freshwater high latitudes thing is huge. I read somewhere once that like these standing rigging and like any exposed metal fittings age 8 times faster in the tropics than they do in, I don't know what was defined as high latitudes, but that's massive. And also not having salt water is huge. I mean, you shouldn't really put your boats in salt water because they don't they can't take salt water. So it's that is huge point. I agree with that.
Yeah, so again, there's like a lot of information in here, but also not a lot of information. I guess they have probably the most information in the sales section here. And those sails, if you look at the pictures, those are clearly racing sails in these photos. I mean, those are membrane string sails, as we call them. I mean, you can literally see through that mainsail. You can see the spinnaker on the other side. So these are going to be, these are not cruising sails. And if they're racing sails, the question is, are they still usable if you're actually trying to be competitive? And that, I mean, just that red spinnaker, look at the freaking size of that thing. It's gigantic.
It's enormous. Enormous. I mean, what a fun boat to sail, though. Could you imagine with with all of these options?
I love the fact that they still have it appears they have the red spinnaker pole, at least in this photo, and then they also retrofit the bowsprit. And a lot of times you'll hear racing guys call that you turboing it. You're basically turning it in from a dead downwind symmetric kite boat to a more of a sailing jibing angles with a asymmetric kite. And frankly, like having had a bunch of boats that sail with symmetric spinnakers, it's so much easier to sail with an asymmetric kite if you're jibing, like so much easier. So I don't know how that's going to affect the rating performance of this boat in terms of racing. It's definitely going to make it a worse rating having that asymmetrical bowsprit on there. But just from an ease of handling standpoint, you'll be able to race this boat with fewer crew and less stress jibing for sure. In fact, I bought we installed a little tack fitting on the new Spica so I can fly an asymmetric kind of cruising spinnaker, because in the archipelago, you're like, there's stuff in the way all the time. And I wanted to be able to jibe the boat quickly downwind instead of, I'd never fly the symmetric kite otherwise. So even though the boat was designed for a symmetric kite, we're doing an asymmetric kind of cruising kite.
Yeah. I love with the symmetrical one on Espion, and yet I was looking into getting a bowsprit for Espion at one point, because I feel like the one thing that you don't get with the spinnaker pole setup is the ability to go upwind in very light airs with a Code Zero. Sail that you can put from the bowsprit. And interestingly, this boat doesn't have one of those. Can you imagine that?
Yeah, interesting.
That's like what I would say is the number one upgrade you would get from installing a removable bowsprit like that. And even though they have, what was it, like 19 sails, they don't have a Code Zero. That I find is weird. But yeah, that is also something that you could do.
What, okay, to wrap up the broker BS, where on the BS versus reality scale do you, like, how much bullshit do you think is in this listing?
I think there's a lot. It's clearly they are only showing us the good side of things, and they are redacting any details that might not be favorable. Like not having any details on when this stuff was done is a little suspicious to me. And also, there's like no history of these things. The sails is interesting. There's a lot of information on the sails, which I quite like. But otherwise, yeah, I mean, I wouldn't really trust this info very much.
I'd give this probably a 7 out of 10 on the BS scale. And ironically, I've always thought about this. It's like, I feel like we should start a brokerage where it's like full transparency. We just pick these things apart. I think you'd actually have an easier time selling boats that way, but whatever. So I'll give you this a 7 out of 10 on the BS scale. Okay, moving along in our categories, because we're again an hour into this and we're only halfway through our categories. But I think we've gotten through the big ones so far. So August, this boat's from 1985, another one that's over 40 years old. What has aged the best in your mind, and what has aged the worst with this boat? I know exactly what I'm going to say on what aged the worst.
Oh, me too. Interesting. But best first.
Sure.
I think that the rig is great. I love. This is the kind of boat that I have by far the most experience with, so that I'm a little biased in that regard. But having that massive 4-triangle and the symmetrical spinnaker and tons of winches and that kind of sailing is just so fun. I just love that. So that's
perfect.
Go wrong with that.
That's actually my what's aged the worst.
Oh, really?
I'm sick of that, man. Not so much that. I like all the winches. I like the options. I like the pole and all that stuff. I do not like the runners and check stays. Like I never really liked Ice Bear's rig. Those, not any forward or aft shrouds it's just a pain. It's just a pain in the butt. So to me, that's aged the worst, and it's literally aged the worst because boats are not built like that anymore. They don't. All modern boats have swept-back spreaders and no need for runners or any of that stuff. It just makes it so much simpler. So that your age the best is my age the worst. So what is age the worst for you then on the other side of that?
The stern is what's aged the worst for me. I love these IOR boats for so many reasons, but that kind of reverse transom stern is not for me. I don't think it on some boats it kind of looks great, and I like the symmetry and the kind of little kind of spaceship look it gives off, but it's just so impractical. And and so I mean, it's and that is like clearly one of those IOR things that was made to kind of tweak the. It was, I believe, it was introduced to change like where you started to measure the boat. That's why they did that, because there's no like that. It doesn't help the boat like in anyway.
It looks stupid, and also like if you're trying to swim off the back of that boat, that's like very awkward ladder situation.
Super awkward. Like you still find the reverse stern in like some modern designs, but then you have like the sugar scoop,
the cutout,
so you can access the water really easily. But yeah, you see here with this ladder kind of around the backstay here, it makes it very complicated. So this whole space is very tough to deal with, and it's so just kind of working with this area is so hard. Like I installed a wind vane on our Baltic 37, which had an exact stern like that. It's just so tricky to work with surfaces like that, and also this interior space like underneath completely useless. So that is the part that aged the worst for me.
And I didn't say what aged the best. I would say just the overall design of the boat, the look. I like the way the boat looks. I think it's a cool looking boat. And they don't make cool looking boats like this anymore. So that's what's aged the best to me. It's just aside from, I don't know that I would have gone all in on the red. I like the red hull, but I mean, this radar pole and the mast, I don't know.
Radar pole, that's something that you want to hide. You don't want to show off the radar pole, but they painted it bright burgundy red. It's the
design of the boat, I think, has aged well for me. Okay, moving along. Best feature. What's the best feature, do you think, on the boat here? That's maybe in the same category as aged the best, but what do you think is the single best feature?
Best feature, I would say, if I'm going to pick something else, I really like the nav station.
Yeah.
There's something, I'm not sure what it is, but there's something about having the nav station on the port side that just makes so much sense to me. Maybe it's because I use like a computer mouse with my right hand, possibly, but this just feels very homely to me. And it's also a great nav station. Like the way this is set up and all the gear around here, plenty of space for your charts, great support. Yeah, I really like that nav station.
I would say my favorite feature is actually a retrofitted feature, but I love this, the staysail, the furling staysail, which is going to be on a luff line furler where it's an integrated structural furler, basically. That's such a cool way to have a heavy weather staysail because you can take the whole stay down and put the sail away, and it's just like a really nice feature. So that's, to me, my favorite feature, that furl away staysail.
That is really cool.
Okay, ironically, given the color of the boat, next category, biggest red flag.
Biggest red flag. I mean, again, I think it's the lack of information about when all these things were done. I mean, that's kind of what gives me pause here. And also, there wasn't really any information about the engine. Was there? Which is kind of
only that it's 1985. It's the original engine.
Oh, it was original engine.
It doesn't say that, but it says 1985. It doesn't include engine hours or anything. So like that's
a red flag right there.
Probably the red flag. I wonder if the engine's painted red.
Could be. And actually, as you noticed, no pictures of the engine either.
None at all. That's a good. Yeah, there you go. That's an red flag. I'll agree with you on there. That we have no information on the engine or the engine room.
Yeah. Although the engine access looks actually quite good.
It does.
It's underneath here, which is always good.
When you have to pull it out to replace it.
That's exactly right. But I like engines with easy access is almost always better maintained than engines without.
Yeah, that's true.
But still, no, that is a massive one. So yeah.
Incidentally, that segues into our next category, Project Creep. If you bought this boat, where does the spending spiral begin? Might be in the engine room.
Mm-hmm.
Although I would say the Project Creep, I touched on this at the beginning, it's almost certainly going to be in the balsa.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting.
It's going to be, if you find soft spots in that deck, or God forbid in the hull, that's a deal breaker for me. I mean, that would be down to, I'd want to make sure that I get a very thorough survey on those balsa areas and know exactly what you're getting before you make the plunge here, because that's a huge project.
Yeah. Do we know if this has a sail drive or an axle?
Don't know that either.
No pictures out of the water. That whole engine situation is mysteriously, suspiciously shrouded in...
Even on sailboat data, the line drawings don't show the underwater profile.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there you go. Another red flag. I mean, actually, the biggest red flag probably on the whole listing that we actually know of, because they tell us, is that the keel was rebed. Like, what does that mean?
That is interesting.
That's a huge... They're trying to make it sound like that was a good thing, but that... and maybe it's routine, but I don't know. That sounds scary to me. Anytime you start talking about messing around with the keel, that makes me nervous. Yeah. I will say though, the keels on the CNCs were lead, so that's a good thing. They're not lead's the right material, as opposed to uranium. You did that little keel video on the quarterdeck.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, lead. That is what you want for sure. But I mean, there's a lot of, what is it, 8.5 feet of draft. I mean, that is, if you hit something with that going, God knows how fast. And that's a lot of torque into the hull. So, I'd be very curious to know if there was any grounding history.
Okay. Next category. Where on the scale? Fantasy versus reality. Is this a fantasy listing or a realistic listing?
I think, like, if you wanted to be like competitive, I think you would have some work to do, and there's sales roles and there's quite a few things to do. But I'm looking at this. I'm back to where I was, 20 years ago, looking at boats to kind of sail around the world as a young man with my buddies, and I think this boat would be just perfect for that. And some things might not be great, and maybe the engine is not the best, and maybe it only starts on good days. But you can have some fantastic offshore adventures on this if you got all the safety gear that you needed. But also, I think for just like casual racing, or if you enjoy the sailing part of cruising, I think this would be a great boat.
Yeah, which brings us to fantasy versus. I think it's reasonably realistic. I don't know. Maybe I put it in the middle, 5 out of 10, fantasy versus reality, because I think you're gonna end up. I think there's gonna be a lot to do on this boat potentially, depending on what you're using it for. But I don't think they're necessarily. There's not that much information in the listing, so it's hard to say. But next category, August. Who is this boat for?
I would say I think it is a young and energetic person's boat. I think it's like a lot of these. It's going to require there's a lot of work to sail this boat. It's going to be quite active, and you're gonna need to enjoy, setting the poles. And I mean, if your mainsail is on a foil, that is and you have the runners and the check stays and all that jazz, is going to be you're going to be very involved with the sailing part of it. So I think, if you want to go cruising and the kind of sailing part is just a means to an end for you, if you just want to kind of explore new places and see people and scenery, I don't think this is a boat for you. You gotta love the actual sailing side of things to get into this.
I actually don't think this boat is for anyone when you actually dig into it, because if you're looking at, you said young people, okay, this would be a great fun boat for a group of friends to have to sail around the bay or club race with or whatever, but it's maybe too big. Like if you got young people on a budget, this is going to be an expensive boat to keep in a dock, expensive boat to buy new sails for. Like you could get exactly the same fun factor on basically on a CNC 37, or a 35. Like you don't need for that kind of sailing, you don't need a 44 footer. This boat's not going to be for a competitive racing sailor because it's not competitive anymore. In those terms, it's not modern enough. It's not fast enough. It might be competitive on handicap, but it's going to need too much new sails, too much upgrade. If you want to actually be competitive, you're going to have to put a lot more money into it. If you want to go cruising with it, it needs some upgrades, and you also really need to like sailing with it. And again, so I don't know. I think this is, and I think that's reflected in the price point. I mean, it seems like a lot of boat for $99,000, but I think that is because who is this for? I think this boat has an extremely limited market. I think this has to be a boat for somebody that really loves a CNC 44. That's their dream boat. I have to have a CNC 44. This seems to be a pretty good example of that, but I just think it's too big and expensive to be like a club racer, and too intense to be sort of a boat for a couple to sail in retirement, even if they're day sailing on the bay. I mean, certainly it's not a bay boat for 8.5 feet draft, so you have to be somewhere deep. I just think there's a very limited audience for this boat based on how it's currently set up, the draft, everything like that. I'm not sure who this boat is for, to be honest. I don't know who this boat is for.
You'll need a big crew to sail this.
I know.
Yeah, you need a big crew, and you know what? I'm right. I think considering the price and what it would cost, I think you're right. And I would love to go blue water sailing with this boat. I think that would be fantastically fun. I think under any conditions in any point of sail, you just have so many great options, and I think the boat would deliver
I'll tell
every
you
time.
What, but I think I know who this boat is for now. I think this boat is for somebody like Emma or a young person that wants to start doing sail training stuff, kind of like what we did. This would be a great boat to do sail training on. This would be a fantastic boat to do sail training on because you've got a lot of bunks down below. You've got a good setup for a big crew. This would be a cool boat to do, say, 6-pack, if you're in the U.S., 6-pack charters, sail training charters or stuff like that. I think that would be the best use case for this, actually.
True.
But again, there's very few people that are going to do that, but I think that's kind of maybe the only use case for something like this, because you don't need to be competitive in racing. This is very similar to Emma's Navy 44 that she bought.
That's true, yeah.
But it's also telling that she used it for 2 seasons and then decided to do something else. So because it's difficult, it's very difficult to do that. Yeah. But I think that might be a good use case for this.
Yeah. And I think, the price is high, and also, it is going to be very expensive to outfit this for offshore racing with, getting all the comms and the life raft and the EPIRBs and everything. The boat doesn't have any of that, and that's going to add to the price.
Last category. Would you buy this boat?
If I was back in my early 20s and I only had one sailing friend, my good buddy Vega, and we ended up sailing on the Baltic 37. If me and Vega had like 3 or 4 more buddies who were into the same thing, I think maybe.
I mean, you kind of did buy this boat. The Baltic 37 is basically this boat smaller, and like you say, if you had 3 more people to share it with, there you go. That's who this boat is for.
Yeah, I think so.
I would not buy this boat because I think the only reason I would buy this boat is to do a sail training thing on or something like that. And I think there's 5 other boats I'd probably buy before this. And I would not buy this boat just because I promised myself I'd never buy another boat that has any balsa in it. So
right. I mean, that is a deal breaker. That is a good point. And I would need to know a lot more about this boat and all these so-called recent upgrades, and especially.
I'm so full of shit though, because like if I find a boat that I love, it could be made out of balsa and I would buy it. Like, I say that, but it's like when the time comes, if my heart wants to do something, it's going to do it. So,
well, yeah, that is right. But I mean, that's telling though that you're not like this doesn't like pull at your heartstrings either. I don't think.
I mean, I said what aged the best is that it looks cool. I like the design, but it's there's other boats that I think look cooler.
Yeah,
and that's cool factor for me is, I mean, this boat is oozing with cool factor, but I think there's other ones that even have more. So,
yeah, I agree with that.
Great, cool. Well, Brian, if you're listening to this, if you've got a bunch of friends out there want to go club racing, buy the boat. I'll come race on it with you. Sail to Sweden. We'll do Gotland Runt on it. Finally finish that race course. So there you have it. Thanks for submitting the listing, and those of you that made it this far in the episode, thanks for listening. Submit more listings, even if you're not interested in actually buying it. It's just, I mean, it's fun talking about boats. Hey, August.
Absolutely, yeah. No, we need more listings so we can keep doing this. And I mean, especially if you come across something weird, like something unique, or whatever, I think we'd love to talk about it anyways. And join us on the Quarter Deck to submit your listings and to find all of these and join the discussion on there.
Cool. All right, Skipper, until next time.
Hold fast. Thank you very much for listening, and thanks again to BVI Yacht Sales for sponsoring the show. Find them at bviyachtSales.com. If you want to join the Quarter Deck, go to quarterdeck.59-north.com. The Quarter Deck podcast is produced by August Sandberg for 59 North. Music is by the Storm Weather Shanty Choir.